So, bonjour tout le monde. Je suis Pamela Yusfeld, the President de La Paz, and I'd like to welcome everyone and also apologize to all of you. I had a problem with both my internet and my cell phone service being out this morning, and it took me this long to be able to figure out how to get back on here. And now I'm so flustered, I can't even find my little welcome page. But this is the PAFSO breakfast with JP Lemieux and Anne Flanagan. And here she is. Um, I will see if she can talk. Ask her to start her video. Here to talk about the future of the FS group at GAC. And I'm so sorry. I don't know. I'm going to call Rogers and read them the riot act. My internet and cell phone were both out this morning, and I was running around in a panic until just now. So I really appreciate you guys being able to do this. And maybe since we are half an hour late, and oh, and I'd like to introduce Corey as well. Or Corey, do you want to pop on your camera and introduce yourself? Or maybe not. So Corey also.
Corey's just in my office, Pam. So she's on her phone. So
Oh, okay, okay.
she's seeing what she can do here.
Corey, do you want to say hi? Maybe not. Okay, I'll leave her in peace there. That's a hi.
Hi, here I am. Good morning, everyone.
Hey. And Corey, I'm sorry, what is your work with? I know you work with Anne and JP, but I'm not sure what your title is. I've forgotten that in this morning.
Sorry, Corey's just having issues. She's a special advisor. She's working in HFP now, working on a lot of the policy issues that HFP is doing. So she's working directly as the deputy director in that unit. So she's just having. Are you going to go downstairs? Okay, she's going back downstairs. Log in. Sorry.
Great. No, that's great. So sorry, everybody. And so perhaps without further ado, I will we can get things rolling. I have known both Anne and JP for a long time. I think we all started roughly around the same time as each other, and we've crossed paths in a number of areas, including most recently with JP as executive advisor for the rotational pool, and as director general for assignments and all of those good things. So sorry, I'm completely flustered this morning. But I'm really happy that they agreed to come talk to us about their big plans for the FS group at GAC. So maybe without further ado, I will ask you guys just to go ahead. And do you want to go first? Or
of course. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes.
Terrific. I actually can't see who is listening, so it's a little bit disorienting in the sense that I see Pam, I see Corey, and I see JP, but I don't know who else is out there. So I apologize in advance for that. But this morning, it's interesting that we're talking about the future of the FS group, because I think we have a demonstration here of one of the qualities that we heard yesterday from our Associate Deputy Minister, Sandra McCardle, would be very important to the FS of the future. That's adaptability, flexibility, and resilience. So here we go. She also mentioned that IT skills would be very important, Pam. So, you know, tut tut.
Oh, well.
You got back on. All good. Oh, good. Donc, je vais me présenter. Je m'appelle Anne Flanagan-Whalen. Je suis la directrice générale responsable pour les affectations, mais aussi la gestion de carrière et des talents et les DSE. This is a new package that we've pulled together this year, and it reflects the career cycle of our rotational staff. So very happy to be working with our 3,000 rotational staff in all their individual interests and complexities and wonderful nature through all of these various points of a career that we work with you on. My own career in GAC, as you mentioned, Pam, is a lengthy one. I've been 27 years in the department. I'm a rotational executive. I've served in the geographics, but this is my fourth stint really, in HR. I started out in GAC working on recruitment for just a while avant de commencer avec mes classes de français. And then a little bit later, about 10 years later, I was a deputy director responsible for assignments. And then after a maternity leave, I was the special advisor to our ADM at the time, responsible for human resources, working on high-risk assignments, including Afghanistan. Our staffing and our policy measures on those. So it's great to be back. This is a set of issues that I take very close to heart. And I truly believe that our people are at the center of all the efforts that we have as an organization based on our intellect and our thoughtfulness. It's very important to make sure that our people are well looked after and that we understand the needs. So a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to touch on a few of the key priorities that I have right now. I'm 7 weeks into my role as HFD. And then I'm going to ask JP if he can outline a few of the specific things that he's working on in support of transformation on the people management side in the department. So first and foremost, we're looking at the assignment cycle right now, of course. We're midway through the Abroad 2025 cycle. And shortly, our team is going to be receiving the manager rankings. We're going to begin the process of rankings. And we are on track for completing our AAC process for round 1 in November. This is terrific. You will have seen that there's been a real emphasis in the past cycles in trying to move up the dates. And I think that this is important for us as an organization to be able to better plan. It's important for people to be able to better plan their lives and organize themselves for what is a big commitment in moving abroad, and a commitment that's shared by loved ones and families around them. So the more time we can give for that preparation, the better we are as an organization, the better we are as individuals. And that's our commitment to you, to continue to try to move that forward. You will have seen as well that our HOM processes have moved forward in terms of timelines, and that's another thing that we're quite proud of, that we've done what we can on that. We will plan to launch around 2 of this cycle before Christmas, which I know some of you will be interested in, and we'll plan to launch the HOM and DG cycle in early February of 2025. The HOMs being the HOMs for 2026, because we've already settled on our HOM list for the most part for 2025. So that's good news. We are committed to continuously innovating on the assignment side. You'll have noticed that we've removed the mandatory stream preferences based on the strong feedback that we have from our senior leadership about the aspiration to create one GAC, to try to break down the boundaries between our streams and enable greater opportunities for cross-stream assignments. We took an important decision this year to implement a revised assignment length policy for positions abroad. So this will increase predictability, transparency, and stability for our missions and for our people. We recognize that this has been challenging to implement. Individual interests can sometimes be a little bit different. In this case, we've tried to have flexibility with that where we were able to do that, recognizing that operational needs pull in many directions. But now in force, and we think that this is a very good thing for the organization. It'll allow us to better forecast the changes that are ahead, better plan, and employees as well will be able to take advantage of that by better understanding what is coming up in future cycles. We've already published a list of anticipated posting openings stretching right through to 2029. We invite you to take a look at that on Modus and to consult that regularly. Rotational selection processes continue. You may have heard that our magic number is 104%, meaning that we want to fill our positions to 104%, our people to 104% of the positions. We're making a great deal of progress on that front, and now we're at about 92%. So we should be feeling the difference throughout the organization in terms of the number of trained career foreign service officers who are taking on positions in our organization. The low point was 82%, so 82% to 92% is already a very big change. And reflects a great deal of progress. We have an ongoing FS3 process, of course. We hope that that will yield strong results. That's a very important exercise for the future of our organization as the backbone of our working groups, but also the future of our executive cadre. We're currently working through planning for the next schedule of processes, but we're anticipating probably an FS2 and perhaps an EX1 in 2025. So you can put that into your calendars. At the FS1 level, we're developing a targeted process for Indigenous persons, and JP will also speak about the next national recruitment that we're planning to undertake next year in 2025. Moving quickly to two of the other things that I'm responsible for, FSDs. First of all, our FSD Bureau, of course, has been reconfigured so that now the Bureau is part of the broader Bureau responsible for career cycle for rotational staff. We're working to integrate that team, and we have a very strong commitment to strengthening our client service standards. We've been listening to key groups, including MCOs this fall, about what some of the pain points are, what we're doing well, what we need to continue to do. We will continue to listen to different groups and regions. We recognize that there are particular issues that our staff have been facing, and we want to come up with logical solutions to those that bear your interests in mind. We're also working towards a strong result in the ongoing FSD cyclical review. Pam and Hafso will be very familiar with this exercise, of course. We're hoping to conclude that quite soon. And the objective here really is to look at the FSDs and see where we can enable more flexibilities, where we can enable more administrative efficiencies so people don't feel bogged down and weighted down by all that paperwork at every step of the way. And we're looking for ways to enable more flexibilities at the level of our deputies to respond to the very unpredictable world that we find ourselves in, and the types of challenges that emerge, as a result of geopolitics or as a result of local situations, regional situations, natural disasters, and other types of changes. On the performance management side, I would like to encourage everyone online to take this very seriously. As a department, we're moving forward with a number of initiatives that really, I think, will move us forward in our capacity to manage careers, to help employees manage their own careers. We've all had access, of course, to performance management for quite a long time, and it's an important commitment across the public service that everyone has a PSPM, that it be completed, that follow the timelines that are anticipated, that it include a learning plan. Learning plan is focused on our current learning, but we've increasingly been talking about talent management and career management that looks beyond the job we've got now and looks down the road to the jobs that we might want in the future or the other directions that we might want to take in the future. So last year, we initiated a talent management exercise below the EX level for the first time in the department. We think that was an important step. We had some pretty good take-up, but I think we still need to continue to build that culture of conversations between employees and supervisors about what we see as next steps. What can we do to achieve them? And I'm happy to talk a bit about this if there's an interest in terms of questions. This is not about promotions, we've made clear at this point, but about growth and about development. That eventually, of course, leads to next steps. But we see a mutual responsibility here, and we want to equip you well to be able to take up your side of that, the responsibility. Hopefully in the future, we can consider talent management as a complementary type of process to our selection processes, recognizing that there are many ways that we can demonstrate merit. We have to be creative about that as a department. But a first step there is to mature the talent management process to make sure there's a consistency across the board and that there's good access to that process by all of our staff. So why don't I stop there? I know our time is perhaps a little bit more limited than we had planned. I can stay a little longer than 10 if people are interested, though. Let me just say that. Merci. Je vais tourner à Jean-Paul. Et puis, s'il y a des questions, des commentaires, je suis prête à recevoir et à faire mes propres commentaires.
Sorry, Anne, I just wanted to check with you guys. Do you want JP, do you want to speak and then do questions at the end? Because there was one question or two questions about the FS3 process in particular, where that stands and when people can expect to hear. So I don't know if you want to answer them as we go or if you want to answer them after both of you speak.
Why don't we go to JP and we'll come back to questions because I think he may be answering some of the kinds of things that
Yeah.
people are interested in as well. So we can come back
Okay.
and we can reframe as need be, but happy to take that on in due course.
Thanks. And I'm just gonna, you may see me turn my camera off for a second as I get up to get my coffee, which is somewhere in the house, and but I have listening. Thanks.
OK, merci Pamela, merci Anne. C'est très content d'être avec tout le monde ce matin ici et évidemment les excuses pour le délai ce matin pour commencer notre présentation, mais hâte de vous expliquer un peu des choses que je travaille cette année pour vraiment avancer quelques les projets de transformation dans la branche H, mais qui sont aussi très alignés avec notre processus de transformation plus global dans le ministère. So I'm really happy to be here to help support Anne and Vera this year and working on some really important pieces of the transformation agenda that we started during my time in HFP and HFD, but really want to keep those moving forward. So what I thought I could do is just outline some of those initiatives, and you'll probably will have heard of some of them already, but this just allows me to give you a little bit of an update on where we are and on some of the things we're trying to do to help strengthen the work that we're doing for the rotational communities. And then, as Anne says and as Pam says, like happy to take questions at the end. So let me just start with recruitment and onboarding. So many of you know that last year we put forward a successful proposal in the budget process that actually delivered some really important resources to the department so that we can stabilize our recruitment efforts as we go forward, but also, and importantly, ongoing funding so that we permanently have these funds at our disposal into the future. So what did we receive, or what did we achieve through the budget proposal? We received essentially the ability to recreate what we used to call the supernumerary pool, and that would be about 30 FTEs. And then we also received funding so that we can also permanently recruit in our national campaign for official language capabilities. So reestablishing permanently the ab initio program. We had been doing that through FOMC monies for the last 3 or 4 years. So this actually regularized things. And so we don't have to go to FOMC on an annual basis to seek funding for some of these elements. So that's a great achievement. And we're currently finalizing the TB sub. Corey and I were working on this a bit yesterday, and that will go to Treasury Board shortly, and then we'll be able to have the monies flow. So what are we doing right now? We're working on defining our needs for recruitment. What do we need? What are the skills? What are the competencies? What are the experiences that we'd like to have in our FS1s as we bring them to the department? We're also going to be looking at expanding our outreach program, making sure that we go to all sorts of communities across the country and that we recruit for our diversity objectives, but also our geographic reach. So one of the important things that we really need to think about is how do we get out there and really have that cross-Canada recruitment exercise. We're also working very closely with the Institute. Super important that we take a look at this opportunity to revise the onboarding program, and that was also part of our proposal to the during the budget process and articulated in the TB sub. And that's to have this first year where where FS1s would not be on the budget of managers. They would be paid by HR, by CFSI, and we would have our colleagues go through an 8 to 12 month training program and on the job experiences. So this is really to help people see the full spectrum of being an FS1. Intent here is to have 4-stream training, not just 1-stream training. And then that way, when people do take up their first assignments, they're really going to have a stronger grounding as they commence their careers more formally and substantively in the department. So really important work that we're doing on recruitment. As Anne mentioned in her points earlier, we do hope to launch the recruitment side of this exercise next fall. So we'd be looking to do some outreach leading up to that. And then let's say October, November, this time next year, we would actually have the post-secondary or the national recruitment exercise that we're undertaking. So really important stuff there. And then people would start the onboarding in 2026 after they're hired. Hum, Laisse-moi tourner maintenant aux deuxième priorité qui est important pour nous. C'est aussi de regarder comment est-ce qu'on peut mieux soutenir nos familles. Alors, on est très conscient que dans les discussions concernant le futur de la diplomatie, aussi dans l'agenda de transformation, il y avait beaucoup de choses que les employés ont soulevées concernant qu'est-ce que le ministère, qu'est-ce que les ressources humaines peuvent faire pour mieux soutenir les familles quand ils aillent en affectation ou quand ils rentrent au Canada. So one of the things that we're very conscious of is looking at how we can support families as they take up assignments rotationally in our system. So we've commenced some background research already this fall. We've reached out to an important interlocutor to the Canadian Diplomatic Families Network to have a very good conversation with them. We're reaching out to like-minded, so we've reached out to the US, the Australians, and others to hear what they're doing. And we're also going to have some internal consultations with the OGDs. What's the objective of these sort of research and consultations that we're doing is to elaborate what we could do if we want to expand our support to families as they take up assignments. We're conscious that we can't do it all. We're conscious that there are some limits to what the employer can offer, but we do want to see where we can occupy some space, and we do want to see what we can do to better support our families into the future. So some ideas we're looking at, and we don't have these, I would say, permanently defined yet, but things that we do want to look at are things like reestablishing community coordinator program, looking at the issue of spousal employment that often comes up. What are the employer's limits? What can we do? What can't we do in terms of employment support? What can we do to support families as they go, if they stay in Canada for unaccompanied post? What can we do to better reintegrate families when they come back to Canada following their assignments? And then what do we do when there's a crisis situation for our family? So we've seen a lot of that over the last 4 years, especially with COVID and singular cases where there's unfortunate situations that occur overseas. We'd like to do a better job in supporting families in FS when they face these crises. So we're looking at some of these issues, and the intention here is to define what a mandate could be, bring that up to senior management, and hopefully have that funded in a more quasi-permanent manner going forward. Third thing that I'd like to speak to is an exercise that some may have heard, and this is an exercise to modernize our job descriptions for the Foreign Service. So this is also really an important exercise that we're starting to look at this fall. The purpose of this is to look at our job descriptions so that they align with our future needs. Why are we doing that? We're doing that because we haven't looked systematically at our FS job descriptions since the mid 2000s when we expanded our foreign service group from 2 levels to 4 levels. Many people may know that or remember that. And during this period, since the expansion of the FS group to 4 levels, we also had an opportunity to welcome the IA communities, the MCO communities more formally into the FS occupational group. So we've had a lot of evolution in the way we structure and the way we organize our work. And so it's really a good moment, especially with transformation, to take a look at this and to see if we can modernize our job descriptions for the future and to make them fit for purpose. So what are we going to be doing? We're going to start with what we call a baseline scan. This is a very open-ended conversation with executive managers to hear from them. How are they using them, the job descriptions? How are they applying them? What are the lesson learned? What are the best practices? Are there things that we need to take in consideration as we think about how we want to actually restructure and redefine the job descriptions? So this is going to allow for a healthy discussion. It's meant to be something that our classification colleagues hear very clearly about. We expect issues such as, how do we structure a general specialist, the role of the FS4s, maybe some questions around streaming, what are the core competencies, and frankly, what's required for FS as they have more modern looking careers into the future. So this is going to define our options. It's going to define how we want to actually undertake the technical work. And this process would take about 18 months from start to finish. So really important work that we're starting this fall. Last thing I will touch on briefly is just efforts to strengthen a little bit of our work on governance for the rotational workforce. So one of the things that I came to appreciate when I was in NCEAT and previously in HFP is the need for coherence across our community communities, and the need for HFD, HFP to have better sense of what our communities are doing and how they're incubating different ideas. So the idea here is to create a governance framework for the rotational workforce. So this would include not only the 4FS groups and communities, but also the ITs and the FSEAAs, to bring, a little bit of sharing of best practices, sharing of experiences, sharing of things that we could collaborate on together. And so this would be a complement to the AAC, so the Assignments Advisory Committee, from a more policy perspective. So we're incubating what we call terms of references this fall, and we hope to have something like this set up in the winter. And this would be a committee that would report twice annually to the People Committee, just in terms of its work program and agenda. Alors, j'ai arrêté ici. Alors, merci à tout le monde pour l'opportunité pour discuter un peu ce que je fais cet automne et cette année. Et puis, je passe la parole maintenant peut-être à Pamela pour gérer des questions et des réponses. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, JP. Merci Anne et aussi Corey. Mais j'ai quelques questions dans la boîte de questions et je vous rappelle que c'est possible de faire des questions et des commentaires en français aussi. Ils sont tous en anglais maintenant, mais je vais les lire. We have 2 questions about the timeline for the FS3 competition. So maybe those are an easy one to sort of get started with. Where is that, and when can people expect to hear about the next round, or from this current competition?
Sure. Happy to take that on. As I've said, this is a major emphasis right now in terms of the development of the right number of people at the different levels of our pools. And there's a lot going on, I have to say, in the department right now on all kinds of different levels, but we've managed to keep this one pushing forward. Last week, I saw a list of the initial screen. So we're at that stage right now. We do an initial screen for any competition, but we also need to take a look then at the list to make sure that there's not some sort of dimension to this that we haven't been aware of that might lead to some unintended consequences on the employment equity side. So we'll want to take a look at those lists to try to make sure that they're appropriately representative before we send out our screened in or not screened in messages. So I think you can anticipate that those messages will be coming in the next little while, because we're almost at that stage. We're also on the stage of preparing for the next set of assessment tools, and thinking through how best to ensure that we're looking at the appropriate competencies and able to assess the candidates on those. You can anticipate that we'll be looking closely at ensuring stream coverage in those assessment tools, to make sure that we're not disadvantaging any of the particular streams, and that we're leading into this eventual kind of one GAC world. I did want to also say we are looking for a robust result from this competition. I know people are often asking this question about what numbers. My interest in this, and I'm 7 weeks into my job, but my interest is to qualify as many people as possible, as many people who meet a threshold that we've determined fairly. There's another stage to any process, which is you're on a fully qualified list, and then you confirm that. You trigger your appointment by getting a position at that level, competing for and receiving a position at that level and taking it on. We need as many people as we can who are qualified to be in that pool, who are eligible then to apply for those jobs. So if people are interested in getting a number from me, there is no number. But we'll look for as robust a result as possible. I would also really like to underline on the talent management side that people can be taking different steps to grow professionally and improve their qualifications for each round of these types of competitions that come forward. So I draw your attention in particular to a broadcast message that went out a couple of weeks ago about leadership development opportunities, and different paths that are being put forward at the Canada School. There's some terrific stuff there, and I'd encourage people who are interested in the FS3 route to give that a look and to think about how that might complement your learning plans and your eventual talent management plans.
Thank you. So that sort of segues nicely into another question, another couple of questions
Mhm.
we had about talent management. We had one earlier in writing before the session about, what should be in a talent management plan. How do you educate managers about what that should be? Because there is some sense that managers don't really know what they're supposed to do with this. And I would add to that personally, like, are there resources that are available to people who have someone that they want to send on training, or that they see as someone who could be developing in a
Mhm.
particular way? Because I remember that being an issue when I was a deputy director at GAC, that, I had great people, but like it came down to divisional resources, whether we could send them on conferences or trainings, and sometimes there just were none. And then we have another question more kind of linked to the culture of GAC, and the culture of overwork, and just everybody being extremely stressed and busy. And how can you guys support, or how can we support a culture where you know people are allowed to take the time to pursue their talent
Mhm.
management plans and aspirations? I mean, I guess having a 104% staffing level would be one good way to start, to have like a little bit more surge capacity. And but one of my questions has always been, and I hope we can look at this when we talk about job descriptions too, is I never got any training as a manager in how to design a job package. Like, what is a reasonable job package for a desk officer? You just kind of like, okay, I handled this many countries, and I was able to do it. And okay, there'll be visits in two of them, and you're
Yeah.
just kind of guessing, and you're not planning for surge capacity. You're not able to plan for life events. Somebody suddenly needs time off. And I mean, and I don't think a manager needs to be an evil person who doesn't support talent management to say, I'm sorry, I can't have you gone for 2 weeks on training, even though it's in your plan. So how can we deal with some of those things? Sorry, I've made that into a big soupy question, but I think there's some meat in there too.
Indeed. And there's a number of existential issues there, aren't they? And that's the kind of things that we're working on in the long term, as you point out, about the refilling of the pools and the creation of a culture where resources are more fungible, and, people can be moved on a talent management basis as well as an organizational needs basis to needs that are determined to be higher at a particular moment. So surge capacity, is an important initiative that's being looked at under the Transformation Initiative Plan. As these initiatives mature, I think that there is more space, certainly. I think that we're working to build that culture that you describe. Certainly, last year we rolled out the talent management plan. We did a certain amount of manager education, a certain amount of employee education. We'll continue to roll out that education effort this year because I think it's important to double down on that. People may be in different roles now. They may be hearing this for the first time. People at post may not have had exactly the same exposure as people at headquarters. And just in general, it never hurts when you're trying to build a culture to repeat a message again and again. So we will do that. And we'll be holding sessions for managers. If employees also wish to have sessions like this about how to build a good talent management plan, happy to hear about that as well. You were asking about resources that are available, and yes, we are in that environment where we're looking at potential cuts, in various parts of the department. I think that would be completely antithetical to our message about career-long learning and growth and development to say that this is the first thing that needs to be cut. But I think that we also have to be realistic that it will be part of the cuts that will come when we look at the divisional level resources to support. We don't have a centralized talent initiative plan. What we have been encouraging is that people think broadly about talent management. This is going to sound like a cop-out, and I apologize in advance for that, but I have genuinely found over the course of my career that I've often learned a lot by doing rather than informal trainings. So, we have a tendency to think about formal training, including formal training outside of Canada School and the Foreign Service Institute, as being things that can really pull us up quickly. Often, if we think about what we could do within the organization, we are seeing other opportunities that can increase that kind of corporate knowledge and organizational knowledge, broaden subject matter knowledge in a way that makes us more compelling as candidates for the next level and help us to grow. So what do I mean by that? I mean, sometimes there are opportunities in ADM's offices to do a shadowing or to do a fill-in role for a couple of weeks. Sometimes there are acting opportunities if your deputy director is away or your director is away. Have a conversation with your manager about making sure your authorities are in order so that you're ready to step into that kind of a role. A lot of those kinds of trainings on authorities that prepare you for those kinds of roles are virtual ones that can be done fairly flexibly. So yes, everyone is struggling with overwork. But I find it's actually quite helpful to have an option that's a virtual one that can be done on your own timeline, because then if you can find a moment within your work week, often you can squeeze in one of these types of trainings. So think about that kind of thing, and think about coaching and mentorship. Coaching and mentorship are tremendously important for us to be able to talk about what we need. I'm very keen on self-awareness as well. And I think we have to be as honest with ourselves as we can about what we're strong at, what kinds of things require further development. And a third category that not everyone thinks about, what kinds of things that you need to basically achieve a baseline competence on, but you're either never really going to need that much knowledge of, or you're never really going to need that, to improve yourself to a huge extent to be able to do your job. And don't overinvest in those things, overinvest in the things that are really going to pull you forward in the direction that you want. But that calls for knowing yourself, having some good conversations about what you need to move forward and focusing in on that. And that's what the talent management thing is really about, right? It's about growth based on a good conversation that's centered on you and your needs. We have the paths, the various pathways that CFSI has put out for each of the streams at each of the levels about the kinds of courses that you need to take. And there's a baseline there. But we all have individual needs. And, to talk about that with someone who knows your work, knows your performance, and knows your aspirations is a glorious opportunity. So we want to make sure that we're doing more of that as an organization. And that's as close to home as possible. We will be working to set up a small career management unit that will be focusing on things like talent management planning and thinking about how it connects to different things like processes. But I would never want to take away the key responsibility for that from the people who are closest to the employee and most aware of the employee's needs, the employee's aspirations, and the employee's characters. Yeah.
Thank you. No, that's
overwork. Just 2 minutes on that, and how do we put it in? I think one thing that we can do, besides everything that I've said about education and building the culture through the transformation implementation plan, we do build in some concrete incentives. And employees may not always be aware of this, but we use the PMA process for executives to outline what's important for us as an organization and what we want all of our managers to focus in on. One of the elements of this year's PMA is developing the workforce of the future. So what the executive review panel is going to be looking for is concrete demonstrations that people are looking out for their people. And, that's an incentive, a concrete incentive for managers to make sure that this is part of their work plan and that they see training and development and employee growth as part of their job.
That's great. That's great. And there was a question about someone pointing out about that they are trying to get into leadership training through the Canada School and it's full, and how can HFP support those kinds of things? But I think you've answered quite a lot of that there. I guess, and it's a bit unusual for a union to be the one, kind of making a plea for managers, but I do feel like it is important also to have that staffing and those resources for managers, because I saw this, I see it in my capacity as the mental health, the psychological well-being champion.
Mhm.
Man, like there is a lot of pressure on managers, I mean, you guys are managers. I probably don't need to tell you this, but they really are pulled from a lot of different directions. And I think sometimes, if like someone says, well, you should be doing all of these great things, but at the same time, you have, three MCs that are due on Friday, and nobody is going to change those deadlines for you. You end up with people, in a very difficult situation. So I think, I just want to make a plea for the idea that this is all wonderful. I'm really, really happy to see it, but it does come from somewhere, and we need to think of the resourcing and the time for these things in just the way we plan for, okay, we're going to have 2 visits this year. How much staff time, how much of someone's attention is that gonna take? Um, so I'll just go,
Thanks,
before we
Pam.
go on, I'll just make a very quick pitch for an initiative that PAFSO is about to embark on with the Canadian International Council. We're going to start work on a student mentorship, but also an early career mentorship program with them. And we're going to recruit, we've been asked to find both mentors and mentees, mid-career or higher, older, sorry, more experienced people to be the mentors at all different levels. And we're probably going to pitch it for people 3 years and less, in their careers, to an opportunity for them to be mentees, with the idea that eventually, senior mentees might eventually, want to give back and become mentors for others. So that'll be another area, a volunteer thing and outside working hours and so on, but another opportunity to connect with different people, and not just people in the foreign service, GAC world, but also people in different international careers. The Royal Bank is one of the sponsors. The guy who's running the list used to work for the Wheat Board for years and was, assigned and working overseas on those kinds of things. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting.
It's terrific.
Um,
That's terrific. Can I add something, Pam? We
Yeah.
had Sandra McCardle speaking to our management table yesterday, and I asked her kind of an awkward question about the future of the Foreign Service and what she saw as the ideal Foreign Service officer 10 years hence, thinking of this session today. And she said a lot of the things that you might imagine in terms of adaptability and flexibility and resilience, all the good qualities, basic, global knowledge. But she did put a certain degree of emphasis on the domestic environment that interested me, and said that this is something that we don't do well enough as a department. Part of that is telling our story, but part of it is understanding the domestic context that our foreign policy arises from. And what you're describing to me is a way to increase that kind of permeability and exchange outside. So I encourage you. I think that's terrific.
Thanks. I think it'll be really interesting because there are so many
Mhm.
more international career opportunities for people, and organizations working internationally that like I certainly was not aware of when I started in the Foreign Service,
Mhm.
or even a few years ago. So I think it could be really interesting. And it take away a little bit less focused on that immediate, will this get you your next promotion or your next assignment inside the system, and a little more to like, let's learn about, how different people go about things. So I think it could be really, really positive. I'm just going to go back to the questions. JP, jump in if you want to add anything while I'm just going to look at
Yeah,
the questions, because there are a few on similar points. Couple people are asking the easy one about what are the plans for the
yeah.
FS4?
So why don't I tackle that, Pam? And there was a question that you posed before Anne replied about job packages and
Yeah.
and that kind of links together a little bit. And I can explain what we're trying to do in the classification modernization exercise a little bit, because that comes into that at the end as we implement. So look, for the FS4s, what would I say? I think so the baseline scan that we're going to do this fall is very important, because we want to hear from managers. We want to hear from executives about how they're utilizing some of the positions that they have across the network. I think it's fair to say that one of the intents of the exercise will be absolutely to take a look at this category and to ensure that we are having the positions aligned with the intent of what they were supposed to be when the Foreign Service expanded from 2 levels to 4 levels. So what does that mean? It means the FS4s are supposed to be the super SME. They're really supposed to be an expert, a whole of Canada level expertise on a particular issue or topic. So we need to see where that exists. We need to understand where those jobs should reside, and then we need to make sure that they're appropriately classified when we look at them. So will it mean that there'll be a reduction in the number of FS4 positions in the future? I would say that's a likely outcome of this exercise, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be disappearing. We absolutely see a need for FS4s in the system, and we think that expertise is really important to have. We just need to better define it. And we really need to be honest about what that is in terms of what the department's seeking in terms of expertise across the system. So the baseline scan is going to do that for us. We're going to actually have those conversations, and we'll be able to really think this through a little bit more strategically as it comes to looking at where those positions should be and what they actually constitute. One of the pieces that sort of you raised, Pam, in terms of like creating job packages, that's also a really, really important part of the exercise. One of the things that we want to do at the end, so once we've gone through the baseline scan, once we've redeveloped the suite of job descriptions, there's an important part of actually helping managers utilize those job descriptions properly. What does that mean? That means helping them understand, what is FS1 work? What is FS2 work? What does FS3 work? What does FS4 work, right? So managers need to know that so that they can assign properly and to make sure that people are getting the commensurate right work that's responsible for certain levels. So that's going to be part of the implementation. So once we actually develop the JDs, then we'll need to help managers understand, and as they think about what's the right level of position in their mission or in their geographic or in their division, they can best utilize those job descriptions into the future. So that's a real important piece of the implementation package. So I'll stop there and let you go to next questions.
Thanks. So I'm kind of grouping them because we've got quite a few. So a couple people are asking about, one person says, happy to see an increase in predictability in the abroad cycle, wondering what HFP's plan is for the FSIA employees in particular, given that the majority of postings are now 3 years. This would mean that the same postings would theoretically be available again when you're set to rotate. I think that's going to be the same for everyone, actually. And they're wondering if there will be any flexibility in the length of the HQ cycle to help mitigate this. Someone else also asking about, how will we be able to take into account specific posting restrictions on individual FS, like, for example, LGBTQ status, health issues? Will those things that limit the list of posts someone can apply for be taken into account more formally in the selection process? And someone else is asking for, those reasons, family reasons. Will there be flexibility on the no extensions policy for people who have different family circumstances? So I'm wondering if one of you can tackle that as a group of, I mean, from us for PAFSO, normally the advice that we give to people is if you have a specific circumstance, accommodation required, like the law still says certain situations, are required to be, to be considered for accommodation. And, and we always say, if you have a specific situation, ask the question, see if it's possible, because, you guys traditionally have been quite flexible in in different under individual circumstances where you can be. So I hate to say it because it's probably going to make more work for you guys, Corey and your team, especially in assignments. But our thing is, if you don't ask, you don't get. So ask,
Well, ask lots of questions, before you put in your name for an assignment, is sort of a good proviso, I think.
Yeah.
If you've got particular circumstances, whether it relates to you, whether it relates to family members, dependents who'll be accompanying you, whether it relates to your situation back in Canada, We have a lot of people with aging parents, for instance, who are looking for assignments that will allow them to be able to come back in when need be. Again, be honest with yourself about what your constraints are, because your constraints are probably not going to go away. And you need to kind of understand what's going to work for you. And there's some responsibility on the employee for that. I think we need to get a little bit better with our mission reports. It's something that we're talking to our missions about, to make sure that we're better considering the factors that matter to our staff. I was rather astonished when I started my last assignment in the Geographic to read through some of our mission reports, and a lot of it was about stuff like how to get material to sew your own clothes. And while there are people who do that, it didn't seem to be the top of mind concern for most of the people that I was speaking to, who wanted to know about family dimensions, spousal employment, LGBTQ, who wanted to know about special education for kids, health circumstances, and so forth. So educate yourself based on your own particular circumstances. No one will know better than you what your needs are and what you're going to need to be able to accommodate them. Flexibility on length of assignments abroad. Well, this is intended to bring us to the point where we have a fairly defined list of postings that will be available each year. We do recognize that circumstances can change for individuals, and we've always had an off-ramp for postings when circumstances change, either because the organization's circumstances change or because there's circumstances beyond your control that lead you to want to shorten an assignment. So there's that offboarding ramp. But I would really encourage people not to think in terms of putting their name forward for a posting that they know now they're going to want to extend. And I will give a circumstance that we used to be quite sympathetic to people whose children were in the last year of high school, because we know how important it is for continuity of education. Now we have these defined length of assignments. If you know right now that the length of assignment is going to take your child to the last year of high school, I would not recommend that you put your name forward if that's a concern for you, because that's going to be a very hard sell. And it is probably not going to end the way that you want it to end at this point, because we've been quite clear on that. So, sorry to take the hard line on that, but that's the direction that we've moved in. I think that there is transparency for people about that. And you should be thinking about the flexibility in other ways. Flexibility at headquarters. So in the last couple of cycles, we have allowed people with DG permission to put their names forward before the full 3 years of an assignment is up, provided they've done 2 years of the assignment. People can move forward. If you see something, that is of interest to you on the lists and it doesn't align with the 3-year assignment, have a conversation. We do look consistently at our requirements for putting your name forward for postings abroad. We're trying to keep those as consistent as possible, but we do recognize as circumstances change, we may need to tinker a little bit here and there. So let us know. But there should be a little bit of flexibility there, I think. Did I miss anything there? I think I answered everything with those, but if I've missed anything, let me know, Pam. I can come back.
Okay, no, I think that you got everything there. I'm sorry, I'm just answering. There are a couple that I think have been answered during the discussion, so I'm sending people notes to say, hey, I think we got an answer. But if they don't feel like they have an answer, drop me an email and maybe I will chase you guys down after the meeting.
Sure. Happy to do.
Okay. So a couple people have asked specific questions. How many employees roughly have been identified in the talent management plan? Can you give us what percentage are we talking about who are up for this roughly?
I should know the number. 17% is sticking in my mind.
Okay. Well, that's a reasonable amount, but also an amount that kind of makes it mean something, right? It's not everyone. Although I personally think everyone should have a learning plan at least,
And everyone should have a career discussion with their manager, I think, as part of their learning plan,
Yeah.
So where does this take you? And you may not get into these are the things I'm going to need for the longer term. as part of the formal plan in any given year, but it needs to have a context. So, but yeah, 17% is not a bad number for a first year. I think there's a bit of room for growth there, to be honest, but it's not 100% coverage, and it's not intended to be. It is intended to have some dimension to it, to recognize that some people need to be particularly brought along in their growth for the benefit of themselves and for the organization.
Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. We have a couple of questions. I'm grouping them in together here on spouses, related to spouses and families. One of them is, do so someone is saying the lack of flexibility when it comes to kids appears to be the antithesis of GBA plus, and we need more, not less support for families. I mean, I think you're on track to get more support with the new Canadian Diplomatic Family Network, and also the things that JP and Ann were talking about. But the person recommending fleshing out GBA plus considerations in concrete terms away from a vague concept. So I'm wondering, like, could you maybe talk about how, you're looking at these issues, and also, like, when you talk about the FS3, the competition list, how are you going about deciding, and ensuring that the lists are properly representative and different people, that they represent different groups in the department? Could you elaborate a little bit on concretely what a GBA plus analysis is meaning in all of these things? And someone else is asking about current telework rules, and if it's possible to have a deliberate policy exemption for spouses, people who need to who are accompanying FS on their postings. I think those are kind of important across the board in terms of family and support for accompanying people. I really don't like the term dependent, but I can't find a better one, to be honest. So if anyone has any bright ideas about, members of household, I think that's that's the term the US uses, which is not a bad one, but if anyone has a better word, like, please share it with me, because I don't like it either, but I don't have a better word.
Okay, maybe I can take on the employment equity considerations and GBA plus considerations with the FS3 list, and more broadly with promotions. And maybe JP, you could talk a bit about telework and spouses, if you don't mind, afterwards, given your work that you're doing on the family support unit. So I mentioned that we've currently assembled our initial screen list of the FS3 group. What we like to do is we like to look at who applied, and then we like to look at who got through the screen. You expect a certain labor market availability for members of different employment equity groups. Where you don't see that, you start to ask if there's something in this that may perhaps, be disadvantaging members of different employment equity groups. So that's the process that we're going through right now, to be able to look at our lists to see whether there's, adequate representation from a labor market availability perspective, and how that compares also to the numbers of people who applied initially. At each stage of a process, we go through this kind of an analysis to try to make sure that we're getting this as right as possible, recognizing that we have different imperatives to try to increase representation of particular groups, given historic underrepresentation. We will be looking at the next phase, the selection tools. And what we try to do when we look at selection tools is to test using different audiences, to try to make sure that there's not some kind of an unconscious bias that's entering into the process that may be disadvantaging people, for instance, on a stream basis or on a posting basis, but also in terms of the background that they bring. So we'll go through that process in terms of the selection tools. And our boards, we deeply encourage members of employment equity groups, equity seeking groups, to step forward to sit on boards. We try to ensure that we compose boards in a way that they are fair, and that we have different perspectives sitting around the table to be able to assess a candidate, from different angles, and in the hopes that we're not missing aspects that are particularly important when it comes to employment equity. So, there's a number of matters that get taken into account throughout a process like this one. And at the end game, obviously, before we put out a list, we want to make sure that that list, again, adequately reflects both labor market availability and our aspirations as a department to improve representation in historically underrepresented groups.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. No, I think that this is this is all very useful for everyone, I think. Guys, I have my eye on the clock. It's 10:33. I can stay if you're willing to stay. I'm willing to stay. We had our AGM yesterday, so I deliberately did not book very much this morning since I need to catch up on like everything else that I have not been focused on. So if you're willing to stay, I'm willing to stay and keep talking. I saw that there were a couple of people.
Sorry, can I turn over to JP because he didn't answer on spousal?
No, there's two things I wanted to chime in here, but
sorry,
yeah, I'm happy to
JP.
stay too. No problem.
Okay.
If there's other questions, I think there's just two issues here, and I saw one of them in the Q&A, Pam, regarding similar issues around the family support unit. So let me talk about telework, and then I think there was a question about information and how do we do a little bit better about that. I think Anne's touched on it, but I'll join in here. So look, on telework, really good question. I think that popped up in the chat too. And that's something we want to explore. We want to look into in terms of what are our limits? What could the employer do? Are there certain elements that we could look to see if we can strengthen, if it would help us in terms of supporting families and those that are looking for work. We're conscious, though, that the telework policy is driven by TBS. So these are things that there's a certain amount of flexibility or maybe inflexibility, as the case may be, in terms of what we can actually do. In terms of telework abroad, too, there are particular considerations. There's security, there's duty of care considerations. There's also the telework abroad committee that we have to make sure that we go through to ensure that somebody who is going to be permitted to telework is sort of covered from the safety and just the ability to work in certain markets perspective. So those are important pieces, but if there's areas we can push the envelope a little bit, that's something that we do want to look into. Now, myself and Corey, we're plugged into an actually very interesting grouping of some other departments that are also having similar challenges. So you can imagine D&D, IRCC, others that have exact same issue we do. And not only do they have it sort of from a international perspective, some of them also have it domestically. So what if a CAF member gets moved from, Pembroke to Victoria? What do we do? And how does the spouse or the dependent facilitate that? So they're having similar issues. So we've entered into a bit of a conversation with them just to see, like, across the federal public service, are there issues here that we could go to TBS with more generally and sort of say, look, here's some of the the bugaboos, if you wish, that are impacting the way we manage our workforce, especially for career public servants, right? And we're conscious that maybe that's a starting point. Linking in private sector is a little bit more complicated, but within the public service family, is there something we could do? So we'll see where this goes. I don't, I wouldn't make any specific views on whether we'll get something concrete out of this, but at least the exercise of going through and seeing the art of the possible is helpful. So that's just on telework. Il y avait aussi une question, je pense, sur les informations concernant comment préparer pour les affectations. Je pense que Pam, Anne, vous avez déjà donné beaucoup de conseils. C'est vraiment de vous préparer d'une façon étroite pour toutes les affectations que vous êtes intéressés à prendre. Mais notre part ici, pour l'unité de soutien aux familles, le concept, c'est vraiment, est-ce qu'on peut améliorer les informations que les employés aient à leur disposition avant de partir en poste, right? Alors, le concept de réintroduire le programme de soutien de communauté aux missions, c'est vraiment pour ça aussi. Can we help missions better prepare mission reports? Like Ken, I've looked at them and had the same challenges going, oh my God, this is from 2013. It's a little bit out of date. can we invest in that a little bit by reintroducing a community coordinator program and ask missions to really focus on that, which is what are the things that people really need as they prepare for an assignment. Yeah, and just one other thing on information exchanges, we encourage, I think there's a question on LGBTQ plus as well. We've done a survey over the last 3 years about working conditions in various missions for those communities, and really important that you access that if you are a member from the LGBTQ plus community, so that you can take a look to see if this is a right posting for you. There are going to be personal decisions there that everyone needs to think about, but if you have a look at that survey, look at what missions are saying about how those communities are treated in those environments, that's going to help you decide whether it's something that you could do or not. And so that's just an important tool at your disposition. Certainly in the future, whether we want to expand those surveys to include other elements are pieces that maybe we will think about from a policy perspective too. Thanks.
I'm going to add to that I'm meeting with a number of champions for different groups over the next couple of weeks to talk to them about rotationality and what I need to know from the community. So I would encourage people as well to be involved with the communities or the champions, or at least to speak to the champions if you have specific concerns, to make sure that your concerns are integrated in the conversations that are going on. I'm also very keen to have a conversation with our champion for persons with disabilities, which is, I think, a frontier that has been difficult for us to cross as a department, and we need to be able to get there. This is the single group that is most underrepresented in our employment equity statistics across the department, and certainly in the rotational groups. It raises a series of questions. Disability amongst our employees, but also amongst family members, raises a series of questions that I think we need to think about deeply as a department. How we can better open those paths for affected individuals, and make sure also that people feel comfortable having that conversation, and that they don't feel that they need to hide any needs that they have. So, just to say that we continue that conversation, and we certainly look forward to getting broad inputs through the champions and through other means. Thanks.
No, thank you very much. I think, as well, I think it's also very important to, again, I keep hammering this idea of resourcing, and also to be like honest with people about, what can and can't be supported, like, because one of the things we see from PAFSO is that sometimes people have been encouraged, this can work out, we can do this at a mission abroad, and then they get there and they find out that, the local environment is just not, um, the mission might be accessible, for example, but the local environment is not. And, there's only so much that the department can take responsibility for sometimes. So I think, getting information, like I know the LGBTQ network did a lot of work on kind of assessing like which assignments would be more friendly, to members of that group. I mean, maybe we need better information on you know, what conditions are at different places. And it's hard because I think, everyone wants to be optimistic, everyone wants to encourage people. We don't want to put up barriers that are not that don't have to be there, that can be dismantled. But I think finding the balance of that level of, honesty and preparing people, and trying to push the envelope at the same time into what's possible. I think that's a pretty fine balance. But I'm glad that we're working on it. I'm glad that's the orientation, is like, let's try to make things let's try to make things work where we can, rather than, oh no, that's too hard, like the old days. I think back on when I started, it was like people just got told, no, sorry, this is not the right job for you.
Yeah. And you have to think through what your personal circumstances will lead you to. What do I mean by that? I've been working on the Middle East for the last several years, and I've worked with a number of individuals from LGBTQ community who are interested in assignments in the region. Those who have kids have a different experience than those who are single. And those who have, I mean, there's difficulties on both levels, you know, and there's difficulties that members of the community have on all variety of levels. But, you know, I find that there have been cases where individuals sort of think it through on the level of, for me, this will work and I can be fine on this level. But then when their child enters the situation and, you know, one parent doesn't have access to the school, and doesn't get treated as a parent to the child, a line gets crossed, you know. These are questions that need to be asked, you know, as you consider the posting too, about what's the whole range of life circumstances that you're going to encounter on that posting. And, you know, what is your bar for what you can tolerate? And what can we advocate for versus what we can't change, you know, and to try to be as honest with yourself about that as you can. And that, you know, that goes for anyone with any, whether it be a health condition, whether it be a family situation, whether it be situation back in Canada. You need to think it all through about what it is that that you can tolerate. There are many benefits to being abroad, and we love what we do and we want to contribute. But we also don't want to ask you to go beyond the limits of what you can tolerate.
What you, yeah, as a human, you know, and
Yeah.
it's hard sometimes because you're in an environment where everyone is pushing themselves. I mean, let's face it, GAC in particular, IRCC, I think as well, it's in the Foreign Service. We're competitive, we're engaged,
We're
all
dedicated,
those great things.
you know, we're
And we want
committed.
to do it, and you're around people who are doing it, and you know, you want to do it too. But it is more than okay to say, okay, I have reached my limit. I mean, you know, I was thinking about this. This has come up for us in the context of postings to the US in particular. You know, with everything that's going on there, with the difficulties in health insurance coverage, with, you know, legislation that makes it very difficult for like LGBTQ youth in some places, with all of the things that are going on there, these postings that seem to be that they should be desirable may not be desirable for a lot of people. And it's a shift, I think, that is hard for everyone to make, and is, you know, the system, I think, needs to look at on some of these things. What's going on, and you know, why are people not willing to go to certain places? Is there anything that can be done? And you know, in some cases, maybe not, right? Like if I had a, you know, young 11, 12-year-old kid right now, and someone said, I want you to go on a 4-year posting to somewhere in the States that has, you know, all kinds of restrictive legislation, I'd be looking at my kid and thinking, well, I don't know what you're going to need from me in the next 4 years. And do I feel safe that I might be able to provide that in some of these situations, you know? They're important questions, I think. I'll just grouping a couple things together from the,
Pam, I am going to need to leave in about 5.
okay, so can
My
I just,
apologies, but
no,
yeah,
well,
I'm going to hit a limit.
Exactly. We've
But
taken
one
up a
more
lot of your time, including an extra half hour waiting around, which I really appreciate you guys and your flexibility. But there are a couple questions from the point of view of, you know, new FS1s asking about, will it still be mandatory for FS1s in the department to do their first posting in a stream? You know, different people are concerned about this. Also asking if completion of a posting abroad will be mandatory for the FS2 competition this time around. And yeah, those are the two that are sort of linked to FS1s, and I'm wondering if maybe that could be a quick lightning round for you guys before we go.
JP, why don't I turn to you?
All right, sure. Okay, so FS, great question. I can tackle the FS2 as well a little bit if you want, and just in terms of what we're doing in terms of what we're calling building blocks for people as they look through their FS careers. So really good question on the FS1s. Right now, like there's a distinction here. There's a distinction between those that have joined the department as FS1s now and those who are going to be joining a little bit when we do the national recruitment. So the FSOP program, as we go into the future, is going to be future oriented. It's going to be about what the requirements are for those people as they join from the next national recruitment exercise. All that being said, I think the question is an important one, which is, what kind of experience are you going to require as you go into your assignments? I think my signal here would be, listen to what the deputies are saying. The deputies have been pretty clear about wanting to have a more polyvalent or more generalist approach to people as they join their careers. So I think it's going to be important for FS1s as they think about, you know, your formative years, your first, couple of assignments. What do those look like? We've introduced a need to have a hardship assignment as part of one of your first couple of postings abroad, and that's been part of the communications from HFP. So really important you think about that. The deputies would like to have, as I said, more generalists in terms of the experience that people have as they grow up in their careers. So that's also, I think, going to be a signal to people as they think about future processes. Does it mean hard and fast that you have to do an assignment in your stream? I don't think we've, Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think we've actually introduced that quite yet. But we have. So there you go. She's nodding. So it's after my days in HFP.
Sorry, JP, just to confirm, right now FS1s are required to apply in their current stream for their first assignment. So your first assignment abroad is in the stream that you've been tagged with.
Okay. So there you go. So here's your answer. You apply in your stream for your first assignment. But let me touch about like what I'm calling building blocks. One of the things that we also want to develop in the next little while is what are the key building blocks as you go from an FS1 to a 2 to a 3. So what are the key experiences? What are the competencies? What are the streams that you need to have done in terms of being somebody who will be part of that essential qualifications for a future poster. We won't define these definitively in some ways to say it's going to be 12 months abroad as you need for a posting or a full assignment. What we want to do is have kind of conceptually, these are the important pieces that you should think about getting and gathering, because they're probably going to be elements that formulate a future SOMC from a 1 to a 2 or a 2 to a 3. So things like multi-stream experience, a couple of assignments in different streams could be something down the road that will become important. So something that you may want to think about. That hardship question that I've also raised as well could be things that are important as you think about progress into the future. So this is some additional work we'll try to do over the next 6-12 months to see if we can come to terms with what are those key building blocks at each level, so that we're very open and transparent for colleagues, so that when you are thinking about your postings, when you are thinking about your assignments, you can factor those in.
Thanks. Yeah. Someone else is asking, will there be a formal mechanism like for changing streams for people who are already in it and have been in it for a while?
Yeah,
That's a perennial thing.
It's a perennial issue, and we've been, it's an issue that we've long looked at in HFP, and it's just the right moment to do this and to have a deeper policy discussion about how do we do stream changes is something that we've just haven't been able to get to. I would signal though, and mentioned this in her opening remarks, we've taken away the stream mandatory stream preferences and headquarters and abroad. So people now can choose to apply for positions that interest them. They don't have to be based in the stream that you actually occupy. So that will give a lot of flexibility, I think, to employees to concentrate their assignments or their interests in areas or streams that best suit them.
Okay, no, thank you. That's great. I'm just looking at the last few questions. Someone's asking about the possible EX1 competition in 2025 and asking, will everyone who is in the current pool be assigned before that happens? I guess is there Are
Oh,
there
there we
still
go.
people?
I was having trouble unmuting. Yes, there are still people in the current qualified, the fully qualified and partially qualified pool from the previous EX1 exercise. The pool still has validity to go. We still have a few more opportunities to allow people to trigger their appointments. And we'll look to trigger as many appointments as possible from that pool. It may not be that everyone is triggered, but
There's no guarantee, right?
There's no guarantees. That's a fairly standard.
You have to convince someone to put you in an EX position.
Yeah, if we see a need to extend the validity of the pool, that's something we can bring to the deputy ministers. But I think that it's also important from an organizational health viewpoint to continue to renew those qualified lists and to make sure that people have an opportunity to come forward. So I wouldn't want to extend the validity of a pool, multiple years in the future, because that closes doors for others in the organization. So, I would certainly encourage anyone on those qualified lists to be looking very closely at opportunities in the abroad cycle. I think JP did a count, and there's 49 EX1 level positions abroad for next year. Do I have that right, JP? It's a high number anyways.
I don't have enough.
So, and there will be opportunities again next summer. Obviously, we also have to place our substantives who are moving around. One of the consequences of having a fairly large size pool is that we will be looking to diminish the number of actors. And this is a message that we have passed repeatedly, that the circumstances in the department are changing. The pools are coming closer to those fill rates that we've assessed are important. We will move our talent management efforts down the line, and hopefully that'll give us some space for well-considered actings. But we should not anticipate that there will be as many acting opportunities as in the past.
As there have been. Yeah. No, that's I mean, fair enough, I guess. That people always say they want more promotions, right? But it's like, as soon as you have more promotions, you're going to have fewer actings, and there's always those trade-offs. How will that work though with the requirement? Like, if people are in an EX pool, but they've only been 2 years in their current assignment, and they're realizing, like, okay, I want to trigger that. Would they be released from their current assignments to be able to take those EX1 assignments?
We try our very best to give the people abroad in particular a chance to finish their posting. We don't want to be disruptive on that level to the organization or to the individuals. So, they're in a bubble and given the opportunity to apply when they finish their posting. So that's the main case that we're concerned about. At headquarters, obviously, people will transition through assignments as well, and they will want to apply at the end of their assignment. If they go through 2 years of an assignment and want to move onwards with DG permission, again, we've allowed people to do that.
They will need that DG.
But there's been ample space in this particular pool for people to be able to conclude assignments and to move on and apply at that point.
Okay. We have another question about people in various. Well, there have been sort of a various. What am I trying to say? Some positions where it's been hard to find FS to fill jobs. For example, my favorite home policy branch, where I loved that job. It was great in policy research. But part of the problem was, again, coming back to this resourcing issue, that we rarely actually got to work kind of unimpeded on our policy research. We were grabbed as like a kind of surge capacity for whatever like weird project came up somewhere where nobody. I mean, remember Georges for a while was he was basically the manager of our relationship with the GAC, which was not a policy research file, but it didn't have a home elsewhere, and so we got to do it. So we're saying, how can we encourage FS to take those FS jobs in places like that, so that they don't end up going to term employees or ECs or people who are assigned in other things? Is this something that you guys have thought about or thinking about in all of these things? I mean, one of the traditional ways of making those jobs a little bit more attractive to people is that a lot of the deputy director jobs there are FS4. I mean, in policy research, I think It makes sense because, like, you have to have a academic kind of research capacity, at least in theory, if you're actually doing the work of policy research, which, yeah, like I said, at least when I was there. But, in some cases, I think they just end up being classified higher to attract people with a little bit more money, frankly.
So I'm going to say a couple of things, then I am going to need to drop off. So
Sorry.
this is going to be my last question. It's such an interesting conversation, and very happy to have taken part in it, but I will need to depart. So first thing that I would say, of course, goes back to the fill rates of the pools. If we're able to get those pools filled, we have a much better opportunity to try to establish that right fit and get FS into FS positions across our organization. So this has been a major emphasis, will continue to be a major emphasis, and we're seeing the results. We will continue to see the results. We still have some gaps, particularly at the FS2 level, but processes will continue, and we will continue to improve those fill rates. So that's the first thing. In the meantime, what can we do? Well, as HFP, we try to have a little bit of a balancing that happens across the organization. There are some parts of the department that get a lot more candidates than others. It doesn't mean that as an organization that we should only fill, I won't name the branches, but a particular branch is particularly popular from this perspective, and often gets very deep lists of candidates. So we try to even that out a little bit, and at the assignment advisory committee, we always get statistics about the fill rates for each branch on the basis of the vacancies that we have. You will never see a 0% fill rate for a team that is getting less candidacies. We'll use the full range of people's preferences to make sure that we are staffing for the organization as well. We do advise different units to make the case for their jobs. Like, what is exciting and what is interesting, and how can you grow in these types of jobs? Often offering people managerial experience can be not necessarily the FS4 route, because I don't think that we want to go down a route of using FS4 classification to fill positions. It's got to genuinely be a specialized position. But management level positions can be an incentive to draw people into maybe less traffic parts of the department. Travel opportunities to carry on particular special projects, opportunities to work on particular priorities. The geographics traditionally, say this would be a way to get some experience that may lead to a posting in our region. You can't promise anything, of course, up front, but it is a natural path that gives you some necessary experience. So we all have different kinds of assets and different kinds of advantages to working in the jobs that we have. And I would always advise managers and members of teams to talk up their jobs and to try to attract people, good people, and that includes a little bit of proactive recruiting earlier in the cycle when you see people that you think might be a good fit for your team to come on board. So everyone should be thinking about that and incentivizing people to come over. I would say as well that maybe some of these positions that are less trafficked might be more attractive in a world where we have a one GAC philosophy, and we're trying to reduce the barriers between streams. Geographics have traditionally been difficult to fill, have a bit of a reputation for being the meat grinder of the organization, workload considerations, and so forth. But geographics do give you that exposure across all the streams. So this could be a real advantage of having that kind of a background as we continue to move forward with some of these innovations that we're talking about. So, we'll all need to find our space in that and think about what our talking points are about the attractiveness of our jobs. But I think there are some answers there, and a lot of it comes to being able to analyze what it is that you have to offer and make that case to the most likely candidates.
Yeah. I mean, coming back though as well to management of workload and stuff, like by managers and what is in a job package and so on, right? Sometimes I hear some of the stuff that people have in a job package in a geographic, and I'm like, okay, like that's just going to be miserable. Like you're just going to be updating the same 15 briefing notes like every single day, for the entire time there. Like, I think that if we gave managers a little bit more education on how to design those things and what had a bit better handle on what work really is involved, then maybe some of those things could be a bit more realistic. And that leads me, and thank you. I don't want to like pull you here any more than we
I have to
already.
get into the office. I'm at home
you.
still, I will admit.
You can put us on your phone and keep chatting if you want. But no, I really appreciate everything. And we at PAFSA will be doing our own sort of round of consultations with the membership as you know, on what we've heard here, so that we can come back to you with, you know, a sort of organized position, I think, from us on an organized paper or briefing note or something on, okay, this is what we're hearing from our members about these proposed changes, because I know you're going to be going out to management first to get their perspectives, and so we thought, okay, at the same time we can go out to ours and get our perspective, and hopefully, you know, make a contribution, because we want to be constructive in these things, and we really want to you know, sort of make the most of this opportunity. I think it's important for all of us, and I'm happy to see that there is a willingness to really look at the work of the group, and really, you know, what we're all doing. Somebody is asking if the recording will be shared. Yep, that's why we do them. So we will post, we will share the link. I will follow up with you guys after, just to make sure that you're okay with how we share the link, because there's a couple different ways that we could do it. Yeah, oh, sorry, I'm just looking to see what questions. We did have one question. Someone's asking about, will there be opportunities for GAC IRCC cross-stream assignments in all of these? And someone else is asking about, how about the poor beleaguered middle manager, and where do they fit in all this juicy mentorship and talent management and so on and so forth? And the person who's been, you know, has 15 years of management experience and is just kind of looking at moving into the EX category.
Those are big questions.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I don't have time to do them justice this morning, but I'm happy to come back and happy to have another conversation. It's terrific to be able to have these exchanges, and you know, we're very open to ongoing discussions with membership and hearing your perspectives. Great value to that, but taking on board that this is a concern. And we'll reflect on that. But I am going to take my leave of you right now. Un grand merci à tout le monde, and you know, we'll look forward to further conversations.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate, and thank you for helping me recover from my my internet disaster.
Thank you to everyone for your attention and for your time this morning. It's been great.
We still have 35 people left.
I think there's enthusiastic. Bye-bye.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. So maybe I will, JP and Corey, if you guys are still here, if it's okay, maybe I will stop the recording. And